So I want to say they communicated very well. Like I give them a 10 out of 10 for that. They communicated very well. Like anytime anything changed with like one of my kids, they would call me, tell me like if something like if it was bad or good, they always communicated. And even working with the PT, April, she always would make sure she called me like at a set time and tell me like, well, I just worked with Keith, I just worked with Carter, everything went well. Carter did this, he actually improved. Like their communication was top of the top. And even like even the residents, if I'm not mistaken, the residents, they will come and they will give me a call like all the time. The communication is a 10 out of 10.
I think in the beginning, not knowing the workflow, I think communication can be hard because I think in the beginning, if you think that you communicate with one person, that information kind of gets disseminated to every other party. But I think what I've learned being in the NICU for the past 2 or 3 years was really just touching base with all parties, making sure that they have a good understanding of what's happening. And a really important thing, I try to communicate with everybody, not so much saying that I don't trust I won't get communicated to everyone else, but for the fact that if I say it to everybody and also giving the reasoning behind it, I think it makes it more understandable to like the staff members why we're doing something and what we're doing and why we're doing it specifically, because I've been able to talk to them.
So I feel that communication in the NICU is the biggest area that needs improvement for us. And a lot of our problems really stem from lack of communication. And when things happen like that, then we all say, yeah, we really should have, communicated things a little bit better. But then we don't really have a process in place of this happened, so now what are we going to do about it so it doesn't happen again? It seems like some of the things that we've come short on, it comes full circle again later on because maybe it wasn't really addressed properly in the beginning, or we didn't really learn from that specific experience, so it continues to happen.
Like a timeout in a way. I feel like is really important, especially for critical moments and for in critical decisions. I think just like you do in an operation or when you're doing a procedure, you're doing a timeout, you're telling everybody why this is happening, what's happening, and then your reasoning behind it. I think if everybody in the team member is there and able to hear that all at once, I think it really helps with that breakdown of communication because, in the NICU, there's so many people that are spread out doing different jobs at different times. And so really pinpointing every single person to make sure every single person understands what's going on, I think that can be a little bit on a challenging side. So I think if we're able to communicate everything at once to all the parties, I think that would be the best. But realistically, I know that's
right now. Every time when a parent is at the bedside, I could communicate with them, and then as long as the doctor has updated the mom, and then they know what's happening. When I relay on what's happening to the baby and the condition of the baby, most of the time the parents are like really accepting, they're really grateful that we're here to help the baby. I feel like there, as an improvement, sometimes I do wish that on admission babies, the doctor, I know we're all busy putting in orders and everything, but sometimes we would have like dad or like the grandparent who is coming in the first time to see the baby and they don't really know what's happening. And when we ask, they would be like, no one went to talk to them. So I feel like if we are better at like updating the parents right away what's happening to them, it would be a great thing.
I mean, all of my most challenging situations were when, for whatever reason, I wasn't on the hospitalist team, or it was substitute doctors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I think they were a very important front line. And then I think even though Tony gave me that overview of the hierarchy, I think what I also didn't understand for a while, and it got easier once I did, was honestly like how nursing like it took a while for us to get our team of primary nurses. And then once we did, I was like, we're hoarding all of the best nurses in the NICU. And I feel almost guilty about it because we just were so lucky. We just had the best nurses, but I didn't know how shift decisions got made. So like, honestly, when like I thought we had early on, when I thought we had primary nurses, but then they'd be watching other babies, what would go through my mind was like, oh, they don't like us and they're choosing not to be with us. Not knowing that actually they had written their name down on a piece of paper and said, I want to watch Ori Petzel. But I had no idea. By the time I left, I was like, oh yeah, well, our night nurse stayed over. So of course we didn't like, or like our nurse had to do this. Like I was there long enough that I understood it. But when you don't understand just like the basic functions of shifts and assignments, and that like, just because you have a primary nurse doesn't mean they're always going to be available for you. I feel like a little bit of a better orientation just around like the logistics of like, hey, these people have signed up to be Ori's nurse. Like even just that communication would have been helpful, but like, it's not always going to work out. Like, this is just like the pros and cons of how it works. That would have helped.
Okay.
With families is to be honest. You tell them from the get-go, your child's here now. I always present the worst case scenario because you never know if you go there, they expect it. If you sugarcoat everything, you want to give hope, but you also want to make sure like this is the worst thing that can happen, because sometimes it goes there. So when it does happen, they're like, nobody told me. So to me, there's hope, but there's also reality. There comes a point where you also have to use words that they understand. You cannot use, like things like fatal. You're going to say your baby may die. Like you really have to go to their level of words, because otherwise you use all these medical jargon. They don't understand that stuff. With doctors, like I said, my frustration is just the changing of like, she probably don't even know who's got the baby today, it's just too much change. It's like the continuity of care isn't there from the medical perspective. That's just my opinion.
So sometimes I feel like the parents are not getting consistent information. Sometimes, especially like for baby that are like almost going home, sometimes we're kind of like telling parents like different things, like what does the baby need to be done before baby could go home, and then a lot of times and then baby have to like stay an extra day or two because something happens, and then the parents kind of get upset about that. So I feel like we should be consistent of what we tell the parents, what we want baby to meet, before telling parents, oh, baby, go home tomorrow, and then something come up, and then baby got to stay another day or two.
We just said it's just like helpful to have goals about like what you can do and like how you can be helpful, because you feel very powerless as a NICU parent quite often. So our family was trying to get 3 hours of kangaroo care for Ori every day. That was just our goal. We knew we wouldn't do it all the time, but we tried. And so like a day where I had a good kangaroo care cuddle that he tolerated, his caregivers, we showed up and his caregivers were like, yeah, we're ready. Let's do a standing transfer. Let's get this baby on you. And then we would have some like, just like quiet, peaceful time, him and I, where his heart rate wasn't dropping scarily all day. And then his doctors would come and we'd get to get a status update in real life and kind of have those conversations with his caregivers. Those were all our good days.
So when things didn't go as planned, whether it was, early days or later days, what happened and how did it make you feel?
I mean, nothing ever goes as planned, I don't think, in the NICU. I feel like we kind of, it felt like you were always trying to deal with what's now and anticipate what's next. And I think some of the doctors in particular were very good at preparing us for what was next. And it was greatly, greatly appreciated. It made a world of difference that when things didn't surprise us, like we kind of knew this was like a natural next step.
Between the babies, parents, procedure, the doctors, because it's multidisciplinary, and the nurse is constantly juggling. So what I would say, see more is like more education on the parents, because that will create good understanding, trust between the nurses, the healthcare providers. I would see more education at the bedside, and also the whatever discipline like the lactation or the resident, the doctors, everything that's involved in the parents, they should be readily available for the parents.
I feel like there were like a few people in particular, like I think it's a small thing. I feel like I never talked to him again, but like didn't talk to him much again. The fellow was Tony when like he was born. And I was really glad he came to our room and was like, let me tell you about the hierarchy of NICU. These are the people. This is how this works. And like, we needed that. And we were, for the most part, remembered it, not always. And then April, our physical therapist, also spent a long time with us in the hospital room, when I was still admitted, just explaining kind of the way things work, what things are probably going to be frustrating, when communication is frustrating, what to do, like making sure I understood why to go to Sarah, when to go to Sarah. Right. So that was all, at the end of the day, I felt like we had a lot of advocates in our corner, but we also had so many different attendings and they weren't there, or maybe they were there and I missed them, but man, I was there a lot. I spent a lot of time in the NICU and there were attendings that I never met. And I think this is because of the pandemic, that the attendings were changing so often and then we didn't have that consistency. But it was very hard to try to build a new rapport. Because I found that what happened for me personally is I had a lot of questions. I consider myself Ori's, chief medical provider in many ways. I know I'm not a provider, but I'm the one who's going to be with him when we leave the NICU. So I really wanted to understand what was happening every step of the way. It was important to me to take the time to do that. And I often felt like that was just interpreted and sometimes dismissed as anxiety. I'd be asking questions to try to understand, and then I'd get, don't worry. And I'm like, no, I understand. Yeah. Of course, well, I'm going to worry, but I feel like I've got tools to deal with my worry. I'm trying to get information and I'm trying to understand the plan and I'm trying to understand my role in that plan. And that was always those were the hardest miscommunications when I felt like, no, I'm just, but what are we going to do if this happens? And I'll be like, no, just don't worry, mama, don't worry. And I'm like, that's insulting. I just want to know what's going on, and that would never happen with the folks who knew me because they knew where the answer, and of course they knew I was anxious, who's not, but yes, I was anxious, but whatever their perceptions of that, I didn't feel like it impacted their ability to answer my questions, understand my questions, walk us through it, Yeah. Sometimes folks who didn't know us, I didn't feel the same. Yeah. Clarity. Yeah.
Lack of communication. It's frustrating, and then when nurses doesn't get heard as well. I think, that makes communication.
Hazel, what do you think?
I think the very important thing in the essence of working in the NICU is effective communication. Very frustrating, especially me. I am always in the bedside. If the things that the things that I presented is not being heard, because I'm always be an advocate for these little ones, and it's not done. Especially every time I work every single day, I always put myself to have like, I need to accomplish this, but if that's not accomplished, it leaves me big frustration. A great day at work is sending babies home. That's the best part. It means it's a accomplishment. That's the great thing.
A good day, a good day, it's actually more having to do when parents come in and it's the first time that they've kangarooed, or the first time for something, first time for diaper change, first time they've held a baby, like first time the daddy sees the baby and is crying. Like, to me, those are like little precious moments, and I'm sensitive when daddies cry, but I think it's like milestone that we take for granted, that, when you have a newborn, you take home, you've seen this, but there's first time they bathe a baby, like there's a lot of first times. So to me, that's like makes my day, the first time for something for the parents.
For me, like, I don't work by the bedside, so I don't see what's happening with the baby, but to see a baby graduate and go home after 6 months, I'm excited for the parents, and I'm excited when they come out and say, oh, I got to hold her today, or so I'm excited for that. I like that. Like, I never want to see a sick baby, but of course I work in a NICU, so like, that's what I'm excited about. When they get to go home after 6 or 7 months, or even 1 week, and the parents are excited about it.
Things like maybe offering a mom to kangaroo, and she might be super happy, and she might say something like, wow, my baby's been here a month. Nobody's ever offered that before. And I think it's just disappointing, because I think all of us, we've done this for a long time, a lot of us, and it can be day in and day out. And sometimes I forget, or we might forget, that for this parent or family, this is their first. And so sometimes things like giving the baby the first bottle, we forget to include them, especially if they're not a family that's around all the time, when we can just go about routine caregiving things like it's just another baby. So sometimes those are disappointments, I think, or areas we fall short in terms of offering the family to be a part of the most optimal, like, family-centered option of care.
Good days that I felt were good was when I saw that when she no longer had the trach, if I'm calling that properly, in her anymore. She was breathing on her own. The day that she finally cried, I heard her actual first cry, because when she was born, she didn't cry. So that was a good day for me. Then, excuse me, sorry, I have very weird shorts on right now. The day that I had another good day was when they took the oxygen off of her. She was breathing on room air by herself, and everything was basically going good for her. So the day when she had no trach, when she was breathing on her own, those were all good days for me.
It would be like a lot of attention given to, like, first kangaroo, first bottle given. Like, I think some of those milestones are just so important for families. And like yesterday, I just even heard of a baby that, like, was given two bottles by 2 different nurses, and the mom does it every day. And it was just heartbreaking to me that I feel like we stole that from her. And so maybe a small practical thing would to be really everybody on the team, nurses, doctors, be focused on, like, letting parents have those moments of some key milestones, and that we wouldn't, like, be in such a rush to feed the baby a bottle in the morning when we know mom is coming in the afternoon. Like, she should get that first chance. And sometimes I think we all would say we know that, but, like, practically how that comes out, things get busy, or the baby looks really hungry, and we just feel like we're just going to jump in. And it'd be nice to like really like, I don't know, call attention to those things so the parents could have those first memories.
After day 5, I took really thorough notes. I was going to show you a couple of pictures since it's being recorded. And here's the thing. Sarah knows that I'm like this, so, and you guys asked me, so y'all know me. So but yeah, so this is when, I know I'm telling the story, but can you see that?
Yeah.
That was the first year of Dylan.
Wow.
And you see his little eyes were like open. And when they were moving me from labor and delivery, this was like, let's see if you can see it. I'm putting up like a peace sign. It's blurry, but I just felt like it was truly an act of faith to be like, okay, I wanted to make sure I documented as much as I can every those moments. They were really, really special. And then here's when we first went to the NICU.
Aww.
Dylan. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So those were some moments. They were just really, really special. And I think, and this is the drop. It was February 4th, so 3 days later. And they were at the point where they were saying, okay, we have donor milk ready if he's going to need it. And there is the literal, okay, it was like one drop and they ran it down there. And then every day, like I started to get like more and more milk. So that was really, really special. So
I think a great day, probably the biggest highlights have to do with families, whether that's helping a mom kangaroo her child for the first time, or being successful at breastfeeding, or experiencing giving them a bottle for the first time. Maybe just, allowing a parent to have an experience that they may think that they had to surrender or give up when they learned their baby was going to be in the NICU. So to kind of be a part of that and make that happen is usually a great day.
I'll say definitely the support system that you have will help you like navigate through everything. Like my mom being there and also dad being there, it helped me like stay calm and just get through, make the NICU experience much more smoother. So I'll say definitely the support system.
Afraid to hold him. I've always been afraid of small babies, and then I have this 1 pound baby. I'm talking afraid of like 7 pound babies. I was nervous. And so his primary nurse, Vivian, she changed our life, like really, really changed everything for me, but for our family. And she said, when are you going to hold him? And Dylan may have been 3 days old. And I said, I don't know. I'm going to wait until he's a little bit bigger. And I was sitting at the bedside and she said, no, she leaned into me like she was like my Black grandmother from Mississippi. And I don't know if you know Vivian, she's a short Asian woman, okay? And she said, you need to hold him now. He needs your touch. And I said, okay. And okay, it was like a Friday. She said, you get through the weekend, you come Monday, you wear this type of shirt, and you be ready to hold him. I was so nervous. And when I got there Monday, she put him on my chest and I held him. It was like glue. It was so magical. So, and at that point, I was there like every day, holding him, working with the entire team.
Navigating that if we didn't have providers that we knew and trusted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think early on, we had some guides who really took a lot of time to orient us, and we felt really cared for, right? And we kind of knew what was in front of us. But then it took a while to like actually get our nurses, like for a while we were just cycling through our nurses. We didn't have a primary nurse at first. And, then our doctor that we knew really well wasn't there anymore. And you kind of felt, it felt a little rudderless if we didn't know much. If we didn't even know who was taking care of him, or we didn't know anything about who was taking care of him. And then once we got our primary nurses, if our primary nurses were there, it felt like, you know, we could handle anything. Or if our hospitalists, the pediatricians that we knew really well were there, we could handle anything. If neither our primary nurses were there, nor the hospitalists were there, or we didn't know the attendings, and there was a curveball and they were like, actually, we want to do this. And we all along had thought the plan was that was always really hard because it just felt like, well, where is this coming from? What, you know, I know everybody has the same end goal in mind, but if we don't know each other, I don't have the confidence that they know Ori very, you know, it's like, not that I don't trust everybody, but it was hard when we didn't have relationships with people.
In NICU for a month, it was kind of hard. Like one being at home and then one being still in the hospital. So it was like I was running back and forth. But like the nurses, they would make sure I would FaceTime my kids like all the time. Make sure they always call me and give me updates. And make sure, like, even if it was something that I didn't understand, like what they were talking about, I would ask them questions. They would always tell me like get deeper into it or like break it down so I can better understand it. The nurses, they were very, very helpful as well. Like when one thing that stood out to me during my experience with NICU was my son Keith. He had to get a PDA. He had a PDA, and the nurse, Lizzie, I want to say, Lizzie, she, like, I was there at the hospital at like 6:00 in the morning, and his surgery started at about 7:30, I want to say. And she gave me a number for the prayer line. And I actually used the number that day, and I called them twice actually, and prayed. And I say like that was one of the best things she could have ever done, like during that hard time of him getting surgery.
Honestly, if the parent, because there was two moms in there that, you know, I saw, and I'm in contact with one of the moms. I text her here and there sometimes. You know, she sends me pictures of her beautiful baby boy. I sent her pictures of Zoe. You know, it's nice to have someone to talk to who knows what you're going through, even though you're not going through the same experience. My daughter was different from her son. Whether your child is a preemie or not a preemie, but they're still in the NICU. It's, you know, it's nice to have someone there, whether to just talk to, you know, whether it's about the baby or whether it's just about how your life is outside of the NICU. You know, it's nice to have a support system. Whether or not you are family to that person, it's nice to have someone else to support. So I would just like to, you know, put out from there, it's nice to make friends in the NICU. Don't be scared to just say, hi, how are you? You know, because I started seeing her every day. I decided, you know, let me say hi. You know, I even got to see her son through, you know, him being in the incubator. You know, I saw him. I saw her kangarooing him. You know, I saw how tiny he was. And, you know, seeing him now, I'm glad that I got to make at least a friend in the NICU.
Yeah.
So it's like I really do appreciate every nurse and doctor, and I appreciate everyone that did what they could for my daughter. And I also appreciate the friend that I made in the NICU. Because believe it or not, the NICU is also like family. They treat you like family. And they always want what's the best at heart for your daughter or son. So I'm glad I got to experience the NICU at UIC.